I dreamed I saw Joe here last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he.
Good evening and welcome to Voices Beyond Borders. We have a stellar lineup of 6 poets and musicians. Honey Novick, Michael Fraser, James Phelan, Evie Shockley, Lillian Allen, and George Elliot Clarke are here with us for this poetic and musical tribute to Paul Robeson in celebration of Black History. I'd like to extend a big thank you to the Socialist Project for hosting us, for their financial support, and for helping to publicize tonight's event. I especially would like to dedicate this evening to the late Leo Panitch, who tragically passed away from COVID-19 on December 19th, 2020. A scholar and activist like Robeson himself, Leo exhibited a profound humanism, enthusiastically encouraged artists, and promoted the power of art to help transform society. He was at the heart of our cultural committee, our December Zoom planning meeting from his hospital bed. He is sorely missed and loved and lives in our ongoing cultural work in this art-filled evening. The concert we commemorate tonight took place on May 18th, 1952, when African-American singer, actor, athlete, scholar, and political activist Paul Robeson performed an outdoor concert at the Peace Arch Park situated on the Canada-United States border between the contiguous communities of Blaine, Washington, and Surrey, BC. At least 25,000 adoring Robeson admirers gathered on both sides of the border, with some news report running as high as 45,000. An outspoken supporter of civil rights worldwide, a pro-labor activist, Robeson also fought against official U.S. anti-communism that led to a national crusade led by Joe McCarthy against progressive organizations and individuals. Increasingly persecuted for his political views, in the late 1940s, Robeson's passport was confiscated by the State Department, denying his right to travel and perform outside the United States. Although Canada did not require United States citizens to show a passport, in the weeks before the concert, he was prevented from crossing into Canada. Honey Novick is a singer, songwriter, voice teacher, and poet who has been published in numerous anthologies and is the author of 9 chapbooks. She teaches voice yoga, has 8 CDs to her name, and accompanies poets Bill Bissett and George Elliot Clarke on a regular basis. She is the 2020 recipient of the Community Hero Award, 2020 Canadian Senior Artist Resource Network Mentor Award, and 3rd-time awardee of the Dr. Reva Gerstein Legacy Fund. Her upcoming collections of poetry are titled Bob Dylan, My Rabbi, and A Riot of Resilience, a tribute to the older woman. Take it away, honey.
In honor of Black History Month and for the legacy of Paul Robeson, I dedicate my segment to Moshe Horowitz, my North African grandfather. I say your name. To Alberta Williams King, who was murdered while playing the organ at her church service and whose son, Martin, preached about the content of one's character. I say your name. To Gwen and Len Johnston, parents of my friends Carol, Clayton, and Christine. They operated the Third World Bookstore and gave me my first Joan Baez book. They encouraged me, a young singer, to accept the invitation from the First Unitarian Church to sing Joe Hill at the commemoration of Robeson's passing. I say your name. To the Toronto Jewish Folk Choir, who Robeson chose to sing with, which inspired me to sing with them. I say your name. And to my foremother, Shirley Chisholm, who coined the phrase unbound and unbought. I say your name. Robeson and Murphy of Vancouver. Union leader Ray Stevenson tells the story of Harvey Murphy, Paul Robeson, Grand Basso humanist, lawyer, football player, quote, Negro, unquote, communist, in a cultural exchange, a demonstration for peace. These two men and others made history when in 1952, 40,000 Vancouverites, other BCers, and Americans gather for the historic Peace Arch concert. Like a nugget hidden in the palm of the hand, this story unfolds and is proffered for history. In another day and age, Harvey Murphy, Union Director of Mine, Mills, and Smelters Workers of British Columbia, invites the great singer to address the 1952 Union's convention. But these were bleak times when beliefs and commitments caused the American government to revoke Robeson's passport, disallowing him to travel and work. Says Murphy of Vancouver, quote, aware of the Union's stand with respect to their Black members and other oppressed people, Robeson readily accepted the invitation, unquote. Since no native-born American ever needed a passport to enter Canada, no trouble was expected. Wrong. Waiting were many Canadians and a very friendly Vancouver press. Robeson was assured the government of Canada would not refuse him entry. Vancouver was waiting to give him a warm welcome. However, the American State Department threatened imprisonment and fines just for singing. While Robeson argued with the border guard, a Union delegation arrived to escort him to Vancouver. He wasn't allowed to enter Canada. Delegate Murphy proposed Robeson sing on one side of the border to an audience on the other side. In time, an illegal electrical phone hookup was created. Disappointed Union members assembled at the hall. Unbeknownst to them, Robeson phoned. Through loudspeakers, he addressed them, vowing them to come back singing. Murphy drafted a resolution listing grievances against the U.S. State Department and determined to broadcast the incident widely by setting up a concert, May 18, 1952, at the Peace Arch in Blaine, Washington, just over the American border. To make the Robeson Rally a gathering of international significance for peace and freedom, the Union members set up an upright piano on a truck bed. Speakers were arranged so that a large crowd could hear. 40,000 Canadians and Americans showed up from the heart of the Vancouver people. This historical nugget attests to a grassroots legend born, instilling pride in a viable, unforgettable, indomitable spirit. Let's keep this song relevant like an anthem. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. The copper bosses killed you, Joe. They killed you, Joe, says I. Takes more than guns to kill a man. Says Joe, I didn't die. Says Joe, I didn't die. and standing there as big as life and smiling with his eyes, says Joe, what they could never kill went on to organize. Joe Hill ain't dead, he says to me. Joe Hill ain't never died. Where brave people defend their rights, Joe Hill is by their side. Joe Hill is by their side. From the deep south to the frozen north, in every street and mill, where people stand up for their rights, that's where you'll find Joe Hill. That's where you'll find Joe Hill. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. You're 10 years dead, says I to him. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. Anyway, thank you for listening to me and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, honey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Terrific. I'll just say right here that Paul Robeson was an ardent supporter of trade unions and held the political position that trade unions were crucial to civil rights. And our next performer is going to be Michael Fraser. Michael Fraser has been published in numerous national and international anthologies and journals, and he's also published a few books. He was published in Best Canadian Poetry in English 2013 and 2018. He has won numerous awards, including Freefall Magazine 2014 and 2015 Poetry Awards, his 2016 CBC Poetry Prize, and the 2018 Gwendolyn McEwen Poetry Competition. Okay, Michael.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And thanks to Giovanna and Honey for inviting me to this wonderful event. It's a plum pleasing pleasure to be reading with the likes of Evie, Lillian, and my tremendous mentor, George Elliot Clarke. I'll read my Paul Robeson poem first from my collection To Greet Yourself Arriving, which is basically a self-indulgent homage to my favorite Black historical figures throughout the Americas, including many Brazilians, Afro-Latinos, and of course, tons of Afro-Canadians. And it has an amazing introduction by George Elliot Clarke. Thanks again, George. Okay, Paul Robeson. At first, they didn't know the voice was blooming mahogany, non-ethereal sound born from the hulls of looting ships and skin-filled galleons. The arrival of cannon thunder rolling far inland, foreshadowing shadows. They screeched to a stop when they uncovered its source. Eyes scrounging what couldn't possibly be. But he's all Negro, they mouthed. A dust bag race swung a jury ahead. Then he spoke in walking bass lines, his words sublime and deep as if a dictionary had bore him. The meaning flew past them, and they stared again and again, waylaid by what couldn't be. Okay, so that's Paul Robeson. And I have 10 minutes. I recently completed a collection I've been working on for a while about Black Canadians who went to fight in the American Civil War. And I'll read Grand Junction from it. I became contraband, near about muled back to bondage when a copperhead and his consort led me night in their hayloft, till I heard him wish General Lee had triumphed in Antietam and closed the ball early. I had to acknowledge the corn before he grabbed his pig sticker. I fleet-footed for miles through torn Tennessee, hitched with fellow runners, plowing north on old wagon roads. We reached Union lines where pickets led us under spry moongleam. We wolfed down liver mush, sighed with collared baits, before sips of old red-eye laid us log still. Morning splashed the Jonah's den we had happened into. Scores of fellow Negroes lay strewn with heads balanced on haversacks, some grayback infected, dew poisoned along pip jennies, slumped with shakes on litters. The strong rooted up for colored regiments. They were tenderfoot fresh fish fitted in northern wool Navy sack coats, cupping lead pillboxes and shooting irons. And there were top rail sawbones employing keen mother wit in the field hospital. Near mustered out Yanks arrived like fallen timber prone on pushcarts. Others, Shanks mere. It was butcher's fare. Sawbones wallpapered the wounded with popskull whiskey before severing limbs clean through joints. The sliced screams, air cracking sharp like chain lightning, crisping peeled flesh. Okay, and the next one. This one's relatively recent. And I'll just call it Insurrection. You can guess what it's about. For a few hours, the planet was in one place again. We eyeballed screens saying, "What the?" as the banner-filled mob undressed windows and strolled through slave-cast chambers, their hats another mark of the least. The trident word phrase fell from inmate tongues hauling days in for-profit prisons. Even guards awaited the real-time riot cop beatdown, but had to sink into their own disbelief. The words became grown triplets as news anchors said, "Bad things always come in threes." There's only so much one can say when language breaks and bathes itself in red. Dawn opened and widened its own lens, watching a cloud-dotted sky ask for silence. How angry people thin even the largest of spaces. How a nation gasps for air. Okay, and that's of course about the 6th of January. Another recent one, Stink Eye. Almond-shaped, upturned, or creasing the brow bone. It told me seconds after I touched down that I didn't belong here. I was 5 and too young to know it already had my number and erased my founders from any book they tried to squeeze into. Stink Eye knew I hated myself before I did and stared me down transit aisles where I learned to accept its side glance kick, take ownership for the crime of being. Stink Eye salted away my foundation like stone slashing water, left fathomless furrows down my backbone breath. It kept value outside of me. How I wanted to disappear into exteriors, have eyes that mirrored sapphire seas, the joy of another's hair. Coast anywhere without suspicion, and let the raging sun burn me. Okay, and I'll finish with the Panthers, since we are celebrating Paul Robeson. And that's another poem from To Greet Yourself Arriving. The Panthers. Because Watts was burning, I dashed watch chains and grabbed dish rank sinks filled with the back-cutting weight of my enslaved ancestors and buried everything into store windows, blasting my hand-tied Jim Crow past, all the covered mouth rapes my mother's grandmothers endured, and flipped the Lord shotgun back because I knew he couldn't exist. And then I let the safety click speak up in public. Because Watts was burning, I became Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, packing intellectual heat in misfilled Oakland dawns, thrusting the bay's glacial bylaws back at pearl faces perched on painted lady porches, their eyes coding me behind police masks. I moved rocket fast and turned history, pounding the 60s when everything moved in Ozzie and Harriet time. Because Watts was burning. I climbed out of the weathered underground, launching the piratic distaste of our soldiers felt in Vietnam, Korea, the gas-soaked trench lines that carved up Europe, returning to see fountains coupled with whites-only outside theaters, or clinging bat mad to hotel sides. I couldn't choose bus seats, but they let me appoint my tree and swung my brothers with hemp twine, swiveled their charred remains under Dixie suns, chasing nights blackened knees. I was halftime in boardrooms and law offices, doing the janitor's ragtime jig, soft shoeing across marble, venting song and seeing toothless laughs, my children walking coatless to winter schools minus books. Because Watts was burning. I knotted history's apron strings and linked up with Stokely Carmichael and Angela Davis to seal the hotspot beatdown on racism's fireside flush. We blared our jive plot points on our half-erased rasping story, how we remained horse-saddled in summer's cotton death fields, our sweat-sliced skin interred and spliced by color's flashpoints. We fly-kicked and cold-slapped cotton-hooded laws with upstart intensity. Because Watts was burning and turning charred brick back into black carbon, I rose to red glare, wailing alarm clocks, clipped the magnum to my side, and finally decided to wake the hell up. Okay, thanks again. And back to you, Giovanna.
Wow, Michael, right on. That was great. Wow. Okay, well, I'm going to just add a statement from Paul Robeson right here, who said, in keeping with what Michael was reading, the artist must take sides. He must elect to fight for freedom or slavery. I have made my choice. I had no alternative. And he also believed that the only true American culture was African American culture. And with that, I will now introduce Jim Phelan, a musician, a vocalist. Jim Phelan was born and educated in Dublin and came to Canada in 1969. He and his wife drove a camper van to Buenos Aires, then bought a house in Toronto, settled down and had 2 sons, etc. He acted for the first time in his 70th year and wrote a play which was produced by the Toronto Irish Players. Yay! He found solace in singing after his wife died and now sings in a choir in the chorus of the Toronto City Opera and with friends in song circles. James.
Thank you very much, Giovanna. Good evening, everyone. My first song is the Eriskay Love Lilt, better known as Vermeo. Vermeo rovano, Vermeo rovani, Vermeo ro, sad am I without thee. When I'm lonely, my dear heart, dark the night or wild the sea, by love's light my foot finds the old pathway to thee. Vermeo rovano, Vermeo rovani, Vermeo ro, sad am I without thee. Thou'rt the music of my heart, harp of joy, O Crid Macree, moon of guidance by night, strength and light thou art to me. Vermeo rovano, Vermeo rovani, Vermeo ro,
sad am I without thee. And next, thank you, My Old Kentucky Home. The sun shines bright in the old Kentucky home. 'Tis summer, the people are gay. The corn tops ripe and the meadows in the bloom, while the birds make music all the day. The young folks roll on the little cabin floor, all merry, all happy and bright. By and by hard times comes a knocking at the door, then my old Kentucky home, good night. Weep no more, my lady, oh, weep no more today. We will sing one song for the old Kentucky home, for the old Kentucky home far away. The head must bow and the back will have to bend wherever the people may go. A few more days and the trouble all will end in the fields where the sugar canes grow. A few more days for to totter on the road, no matter 'twill never be light. A few more days till we totter on the road, then my old Kentucky home, good night. Weep no more, my lady, oh, weep no more today. We will sing one song for the old Kentucky home, for the old Kentucky home far away. And lastly, Old Man River. There's an old man called the Mississippi. That's the old man that I'd like to be. What does he care if the world's got troubles? What does he care if the land ain't free? Old Man River, that old man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling, he keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters, he don't plant cotton, and then that planting is soon forgotten. But Old Man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, we sweat and strain, body all aching and racked with pain. Tote that barge, lift that bale, you gets a little drunk and you lands in jail. I gets weary and sick of trying. I'm tired of living, but scared of dying. An Old Man River, he just keeps rolling along. Poor folks work on the Mississippi. Poor folks work while the rich folks play, hauling those boats from the dawn till sunset, getting no rest till the judgment day. Don't look up and don't look down. You don't durst make the white boss frown. Bend your knee and bow your head and pull that rope until you're dead. Let me go away from the Mississippi. Let me go away from the white man boss. Show me that stream called the River Jordan. That's the old stream that I long to cross. Old Man River, that old man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling, he keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters, he don't plant cotton, and then that planting is soon forgotten. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, we sweat and strain, body all aching and racked with pain. Tote that barge, lift that bale, you gets a little drunk and you lands in jail. I gets weary and sick of trying. I'm tired of living, but scared of dying. An old man River, he just keeps rolling along. Thank you.
James, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Wow. Wow, yes, indeed. Somebody is to put up in the chat room that she was very happy to hear Old Man River, but also pointed out that Robeson changed the last four, well, the last couple of lines there, and that is so true. He had no trouble rewriting lyrics when they were offensive to him. And that the way he changed those last four was that he turned the last four lines, which were of resignation. He talked about he had no choice but to keep on fighting and struggling, and therefore he changed it into a song of resilience and protest. Thank you for pointing that out.
But I keeps laughing instead of crying. I must keep fighting until I'm dying. And old man River, he'll just keep rolling along.
Next, we have Evie Shockley, who joins us from the United States, representing that border straddling that happened on the night of the concert. And so we welcome her and anyone in our audience from the United States in the spirit of that night. Evie Shockley is a poet and scholar. Her most recent poetry collections are The New Black and Semi-Automatic. Both won the Hurston Wright Legacy Award, and the latter was a finalist for the Pulitzer and LA Times Book Prizes. She has received the Lannan Literary Award for Poetry, the Stephen Henderson Award, the Holmes National Poetry Award, and fellowships from the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study and Cave Canem. Shockley is a professor of English at Rutgers University, where there are a number of, there's a library, I believe, named after Paul Robeson, and a few other things. Evie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Giovanna, and thank you to everyone for being here. I'm really honored to be able to celebrate this occasion and remember one of my university's most famous alma maters, alumni, I should say. And very happy to be a part of the kind of cultural tributes that we've been hearing tonight. I'm going to read 3 poems, and I chose them, the first one because it has a direct reference to Paul Robeson in it, but all 3 of them because they speak to a kind of international connection and international movement and activism and international awareness that I feel is in the spirit of the occasion. So this first one is called London Bridge. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Entering the cathedral, I hear these re-moving words echoing off the tear-stained glass windows. People from 100 nations, wet with London rain, dripping from their hair and umbrellas, pooling into puddles, the spit of 50 foreign tongues, visaed by Christ. The choir mouths open, a blues estuary, stems the vernacular tide, denigros denotes, refrains from a spiritual funk, imports my past, refines the raw product, the no of my yesterday. Onyx pearls lost overboard, what the hell could not hold, so many in the same boat. Othello came to England during Elizabeth's reign, moored to the stage, the noblest of savages. He entertained the idea of Robeson, St. Paul's Immaculate Reception. The Thames, not an old man to sing home about, but on its shores, the solid opulence of the Anglican Church, a veritable vault of safety from enemy bombs, starvation, sail. Excommunication, the greatest threat. Not to be refused the shelter of its thick stone walls. Just swallow this wafer of state and be swallowed. Open your heart to the God of Gladstone, Disraeli, and Churchill. Must Jesus bear this cross alone? Devil on the deep blue sea. Just one more bon voyage across the Atlantic, the Pacific. The world awaits. You'd not have thought death had unhomed so many. This next poem is about a different poet and musician, in a sense, an activist, Jane Cortez. If you don't know her poetry, I highly encourage you to look her up. I got a little bit of a setup by Michael, whose poem referenced Watts burning. She became a poet in the ashes of that sort of Watts fire, and went on to have an amazing and long career. This is an elegy, though, for her. And it's called, How Long Has This Jane Been Gone? Not long, not long. In fact, she's back, flapping with the gale force laughter of the first kites of March, growling like a motorcycle of liberation, howling like the angel of field hollers at the bleachers of poetic apathy, where they're always ready to make some noise, but never get in the game. Oh yes, she's back, back like she was never gone, still blues washing over the whitewashing of the music, still pinning the tail on the covert donkey of domination, still hissing wisdom into the imperial bathwater, still cussing the fuck out of evil rapist punks and the friendly ones too. She's right up beneath your mama's left breast, right up in the cook-footed cornbread, still breaking out like sweat on the drummer's forehead, still the backyard over her hot diaspora stew. Can't you hear her? Rumbling like an earthquake through the crowded blocks of Watts, sizzling like the wind off the ancient coast of Senegal, honking like the traffic symphony in the hot sauce streets of New York, crashing onto the untamed sands of the people's beaches of Cuba. How long has this Jane, this breathtaking Jane Cortez been gone? Not long, not long. In fact, she's back. Yeah, back for seconds. A little more Armstrong funk in the sunshine. Another helping of that spicy Caesarean callaloo with a bit of red pepper poet mixed in. Another round of Big Mama Thornton blues brew, right, Bumblebee? Yeah, she's looking for a second slice of that wicked shit Guillen cooked up. Another bite of that African truth casserole Chano Pozo's serving from his conga. Very fine, very fine. One more taste of the scatology spittle Ella's still slinging around the Savoy ballroom. One more ride on the train this side of time before she takes it to her final destination. Have you seen her? Drinking the conjure woman's pot liquor straight out of the pot, sashaying across the evening sky like a bouquet of black girls' smiles. Have you heard her? Toxing in her gut bucket lullabies into the ears of desperate children, exhausted men, and outraged women. Sweeping the dust of corporate-sponsored exploitation off the bandstand with her fire-spitting lyrical jazz cleanup crew. Have you felt her? Rattling your bones with the daily news of the latest pro-democracy drone strike, licking with sandpaper cat tongue kisses the numbed shell of cultural desensitization to violence we call paying the bills. Have you seen her? Have you seen her? How long has our Jane been gone? Not long, not long. She's no farther away than the sound of her name and her hellified poetry ringing out of our long memoried throats. If we act right, she'll be right back. And one last poem that was inspired by a visit I made to the Site Mémorial du Camp des Milles in the south of France. Les Milles refers to the tiles that they made in this building in its first purpose. And because there were 2 million people who were kept there, Mille also refers to those people. Les Milles. There is no poem unless we can find the courage to speak. In the middle of a vacation in the south of France, a chance to visit a World War II detention center arises. Dusty and bleak, just outside Aix-en-Provence, just past the scent of lavender in an ancient heat. The first thing you see and the last thing you visit is a boxcar. You know what it means. It takes the same toll on the breath, the pulse, as the rusted shackles displayed in another damned museum. There are histories of torture preserved all around us, formally, officially, with placards and institutional funding, casually, quietly, unavoidably, in the quality of a glance, the poverty of an existence, the demographics of a mall, a church, a prison. In a former tile factory, we learn again how anything can be misused, how anyone can be abused. A kiln is not a dormitory until it is. Here, there, slept people who were too Jewish to be German, too German to be French, too despised and feared to be defended, even by those who feared we, might soon be despised. If I now say Palestine, have I forgotten Auschwitz? If I say settlements, have I forgotten camps? If I don't say Palestine, have I forgotten Elmina, Selma, Cape Town, Haiti? Must every place name on earth be a shorthand for violence on a map of grief? Orlando, Charleston, Wounded Knee, Sharpeville, Gettysburg, Tiananmen Square, Gaza, Katyn, Plaza de Mayo, Soweto, Dominican Republic, Hiroshima, Srebrenica, Rwanda, Cambodia, Ankara, Adana, Odessa, Nanking. Yesterday and yesterday's yesterday, the planet pushing up sycamores and lavender, rice and plantains, fertilized with lead and blood, with rain from poisonous clouds and the dust that becomes of the dead. Adam, whose name means clay, was not baked in a kiln. Eve's name means life, implies the day that follows. Will tomorrow be a place we can name after something that grows? What is the proper use of a wall? There are so many histories buried in the space and silence around, within these words. These lines make a poor but portable museum, a set of sketches, palimpsests, faint and painfully incomplete, that map the territory of the human, with arrows pointing in every direction, some leading from you, some leading to you. There is no poem unless we can find the courage to hear. Thank you.
Wow, that was just marvelous. Thank you so much, Evie. And we thank you so much for joining us. Deeply thankful. I was doing a lot of research on Paul Robeson, and as I was doing, finding out all manner of wonderful, marvelous things about the man that were just crushingly inspirational and tragic at the same time, I was Googling one day, and guess what popped up? The Paul Robeson tomato. Well, you know, I'm Italian, Giovanna, and so tomatoes are kind of at the center of the cuisine. And so how could I resist writing a poem about the Paul Robeson tomato? So I did, and I'm going to read it now while we wait for Lillian. So this is called Ode in the Paul Robeson Tomato. If seeds be notes, sowing remembrance that echoes sonorous on leaves and bears fruit, lauds to Russia's Marina Danilenko, improviser of the operatic Paul Robeson tomato. Plast indeterminate, this cultured cultivar divines light, turns bravura rain into athletic music, Shakespearean civics fleshing delectable crimson spheres that hearken a kente cloth backdrop, and Robeson posing, statuesque in suit and tie, or as poised footballer at Rutgers, an all-American Othello and Caesar gracing stage and screen, whose far-reaching gaze muses on mortal might to liberate blacklisted songs, spinning in jet vinyl against oblivion, each tune a seed embedded in soil, straining for sun, so high summer bloods the fruit's smoky skin, and onyx-tinted flesh powers heroic recipes that feed a worldly scholar's tongue, telling it like it is. Telling it like it is, some tomatoes ripen redder than others and are banned from the McCarthy seed catalog. But people hunger for the robust Robeson. Slice it vertically and vibrant juices bleed from its center, where a likeness of heart and lungs push breath to scale the larynx and soar via lips and saucy melodies, juicing up dead air. Adored by seed savers and just everyday enthusiasts, this ever-bearing nourishment keeps on playing on, its dusky hue a counterpoint to stately thugs who rallied, seeking to lynch Robeson's fisted voice and bury in shadow what lives freely on air and sun, deathless on streets, in a chokehold, in prisons, refugee camps, all famished for a fair shake. Paul Robeson sings in eternity's theaters and concert halls, in earthly homes and global gardens, seeds and notes, voice and protest in concert, green pale hearts, redden beauty's lips with truth. All right, so we'll move on now to our next performer, who is the indomitable Lillian Allen. Two-time Juno Award winner Lillian Allen. We have so many awards tonight, I don't know what to do with them all. Two-time Juno Award winner Lillian Allen is a poet, dramatist, educator, and spoken word performer. Internationally recognized as a godmother of dub lyricism, rap, and spoken word poetry, she is the founder of the visionary Toronto International Dub Poetry Festival and a variety of cultural organizations such as Fresh Arts that empower youth. Allen has spent over 3 decades writing, publishing, and performing her work to appreciative audiences around the globe, and is presently a professor of creative writing at the Ontario College of Art and Design University, OCAD. Okay, Lillian.
All right. Yeah, thank you. And welcome to everybody who choose to spend this time with us and honoring our ancestors, because that's what Paul is right now. looking out for us and holding the space that we can gather here. Our artists are, you know, everything. They're universities in themselves. They're entertainers, they're poets, they're activists, this is a poem for Billie Holiday. This is a poem for Billie Holiday. Billie, you lived in your drawl, sounds swirling out of black, rainbow splintering through your deceptions of grays to your omniscient blues, so full of self, of music, in your face proud, passions burst into words, pride aches, heartbeat and slow defiance, note by note, Bess's swing converges, Louis Armstrong blowing language, breaking words apart, scat, scat, scattering soul, all over American art, all over American culture. Billie's lips give shape and hues to longings, meditation on deep spirit, on pain of being, elusive love, motions in the blood, fire and history from the bones. Billie's voice, a poet's ease. Billie's voice, a poet's ease, and all that sass, 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 sass. This is a poem for Billie Holiday. So I'm going to read a poem for the time we're in, this pandemic moment and the moment of renewed vigor around dealing with injustice around the world. Pandemic, the year 2020, time reversed the world into a pause to search the lost and found for meaning, misplaced things. Frantically, we grope in quarantine within ourselves, not quarantine from our fears, and our conscience grown thin. How can we fathom that stepping out your door or going to the supermarket to get groceries or meet up with friends at dusk could be a death sentence? Ask any young Black man. Ask any young Black man. In social isolation, we rest, become restless, the unknown looming, weighty words, lockdown, shelter in place, social distance, self-isolation, quarantine, infection count, intubate, death toll, words screaming for submission. And I have to just remember our beautiful Leo right here. Yeah. 2 seconds for that. There is an enormity to the immensity of this pandemic moment, a glum, impenetrable disquietude, the Anthropocene, like worms in cottonwood. We've been moving through life as it's our first feast, paid by an anonymous benefactor with infinite generosity, eyes that glitter everywhere. People say it's a sign the greed of the world's ruling classes has gone too far. We've given up too much of our personal values, flittering, our flitter an accomplice to the pain of the othered. Now woke in from a universal drown in busy insignificance with things, we flitter where to put our efforts, like where to put your eyes in feelings of shame. Then the George Floyd murder twisted our necks and we couldn't look away. Our flitter waited. We held our breath in our throats until in a collective gasp, we found a voice to exhale. The street became our canvas and the silence of the internet clicked and clung until community emerged, coalesced around the horror of racism we all know, gaslighted for decades. Black people are harmed by the spit and spite of white people turning away, even above systemic inequalities and white supremacy pressing on our necks. The year 2020, the world changed before white folks did, before white folks did enough, before white folks did enough to courage up to fight against anti-Black racism. We're all in this together. Are we all in this together? Embrace this poem. Talk back with your heart to this poem, gently. Okay, so I start off by saying Derek Walcott said, either I'm a nobody or a nation. And you can see that in our cultural activists, in our, you want to call them entertainers, whatever you want to label them, but they're transformative agents for the nation. Also mentioned that Black folks with their art, with our art, and Paul Robeson, of course, one of her leading lights, now an ancestor, go to places and give it a soul. It bring a soul or a soulfulness that never existed before. And I was reflecting on Paris, my many visits to Paris, and to see how much of the core of it is African in its pulse and the flavor. Africa forgetting in the triumphant city of lights, but how time slips, exiting the fears of retribute, always returning in memory to the city's glistening streets, turning colonial rust into polish, youthful in graffiti and street art, usher newness from an ancient well, migration backwards and forward, splicing colors and sounds of Africa old and new. Oh, the end of something or the beginning. When the sun dips below the horizon, fear lingers like a faint smell. Nighttime processions of talkers and revelers wine and dine on boulevards and cobblestone streets in style and passion to the music of Black yearning. A quick step back, a drum clap, a soul will not be stolen. Beneath the rim of this boastful city, rain and the Paris glare, Africa lingers in the midnight glory. Oh, how time slips omnisciently strange into forgetting Africa's untold story. African soul in the Paris glare, a nation alive everywhere. Africa forgetting. So yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be in the tradition of people like Paul Robeson, definitely. So thank you. I carry that on. I carry on that tradition.
Thank you, Lillian. Yay. Wonderful, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in the spirit of Paris and internationalism, let me just mention what an internationalist Paul Robeson was himself. He sang in Chinese, he sang in a number of African languages. He supported internationalist causes all over the world, the Spanish Civil War, the Welsh Republican cause, the European anti-fascists. He was beloved in the Soviet Union and active on the Council on African Affairs, which fought for liberation for the colonized countries of Africa. A true internationalist.
Yeah.
And now I'll introduce to you a world traveler, travels all over the place, George Elliot Clarke, our final poet. George Elliot Clarke is a poet, by the way. I think one of the Star columnists, Toronto Star columnists, instead of colonists, called him an award magnet. But so many of our performers tonight are award magnets. George Elliot Clarke is a poet, novelist, dramatist, songwriter, and librettist, as well as the editor of a number of seminal works in the field of African Canadian literature. His many awards include the Governor General's Award for Poetry, the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Fellows Prize, the National Magazine Gold Award for Poetry, and the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Achievement Award. He has served as the 4th Poet Laureate of Toronto and the 7th Parliamentary Canadian Poet Laureate. And he is the inaugural E.J. Pratt Professor of Canadian Literature at the University of Toronto, George.
All right. Hi, everybody. What a great pleasure and honor it is to be here. And I want to thank Giovanna for the great introduction and the fantastic organization with Honey and Mirrlees of today's special tribute to Paul Robeson. It's a great honor to be associated with all the artists who have spoken this evening, some of whom I've known for many, many years and who I'm inspired by and educated by and informed by. And I'm also valuing this moment as a reminder to us all of how important history is, which has been a constant theme of our presentations. I think there's a direct line that goes from Old Man River, in a sense, to the tragedies associated with the Seine River that Evie Shockley spoke about, to the struggles of Black Civil War soldiers in the US that Michael spoke about. And of course, the songs that Jane shared with us, and even the growing revolutionary nutrition in terms of the brilliantly Black and red Paul Robeson tomato that Giovanna has celebrated in her tremendous poem. And also want to reference Honey and her performance of Joe Hill, especially or in particular, reminding us of the connections between civil rights and union struggles and so on. And I'm going to get into the poem in a moment, but I also just want to spend, just take a couple of seconds to remind everybody about I know I don't have to mention it, but, and I think Lillian's presentation really reminded us, or reminded me at least anyway, that one of the special richest treasures that came out of the calamitous year of 2020 was the profound acknowledgement that capitalism cannot function without supports for labor. And the whole idea of a guaranteed annual income, healthcare provisions, the fact that we need to have our own factories to produce vaccines, all of these socialist solutions for the problems that have been revealed by the pandemic have suddenly come into sharp focus for everyone who cares to think about it. And anyone who chooses to try to ignore these solutions ends up finding themselves facing greater catastrophes in terms of the still unfolding nature of this terrible global disease issue. So being reminded that socialism is actually a good idea and a good thing also asks me to remind us all of Malcolm X, who was assassinated in February 1965. Also appreciate the shout out from Lillian to Ayanna Black. So I want to recognize those two persons as well right now. Paul Robeson salutes the USSR, 1937. That old man river, bridging Abe Lincoln and Mark Twain, the Mississippi, turgidly sluggish with lynchees, dissolving flesh, and or perennially ruddy with tobacco juice, sable ichor, and apple brandy, explains why Missouri Tom Idiot implants a garbage-shored Thames in his wasteland. Nothing squeamish about the Dixie Midwest River, corn-fed corpses slopped up there, slampy, gooey, befriending fiendishness like the cadavers of Klan pogroms, suddenly revived and crooning in showboat comic guise. America is a star-empty night, and backward, pervert, peevish, can't-do whites, as feudal as Moore's utopia. Leaves of Grass gets inked over as Dante's Inferno. The Yanks are wily brutes, obeisant to the immemorial fraud of their religions, for they think salvation ballyhoos old Mr. Glory, gold, not old glory, and credit themselves citizens as august as sugar, but their history is theft. But their history is theft. Even if my applause is lonely, I salute the Soviets. They're Caucasians who like to throw off chains and set ballets to the verses of the ingenious Pushkin, Negro. Against the USA's worn out light, I set the colossal glory of the USSR, where peasants gorge on obese potatoes, icy vodka, while conscientiously murderous generals trust to advance history. Thanks to Lenin, Stalin, workers rusticate in the ancient Senate, that's the tavern, and swallow il vino dei poeti, savoring that favored life. And they give Ku Klux killers civilian headstones, yellow watered boulders, impromptu splendor, the USSR. Button down murderers, the USA. Regard the bug house that is the White House. Mad Dog Roosevelt and his pretty boy clique. It's a feces jungle. Study a warren of hoods, gangsters, FBI spooks, democratic savagery. Survey high crimes from low down bandits, grimy as Wall Street, slimy as 42nd Street. I end with this poem, which is very short. It's entitled Harlem Pamphlet, 1943. It is supposedly in the voice of Langston Hughes, and many of you will know that there was a major riot in Harlem in 1943, which of course was caused by the police accosting a Black man and causing his death. Harlem Pamphlet by Langston Hughes. That skull-gaunt cops presume privilege to murder, as mourners allege, to shoot down Black boys, not white toughs, but kids, wrists too skinny for handcuffs, warns us that white police perceive emancipation as a sieve, setting too many Negroes free from slavers' plantations. Cops see our suppression as their mission. Police repeal abolition. Police repeal abolition. Every shot dead Negro attests to anti-liberty's success. Every cop who slays a nigger rates justice with gun snout vigor. Thanks, everybody. Congratulations for a great evening. Remember our struggles and, of course, undying glory to Paul Robeson.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay. And I'll just end with a few words here. I just want to say that Paul Robeson had a lot of difficulty later on in his life. The being blacklisted cost him both his mental and physical health. And he retired in the early 60s from public life and died in 1976. At a Carnegie Hall tribute to mark his 75th birthday, he was unable to attend and sent this message that was taped. Though I have not been able to be active for several years, I want you to know that I am the same Paul, dedicated as ever to the worldwide cause of humanity for freedom, peace, and brotherhood and sisterhood. And I'd also like to end with the idea that he, as I use the word deathless, and George said undying, and our own event tonight proves that. And I'll end with a statement by his biographer, Martin Duberman, who said at the time of his death, "The white American press ignored the continuing inability of white America to tolerate a Black maverick who refused to bend, downplayed the racist component central to his persecution during his life, as they gingerly paid him respect and tipped their hat to him as a great American, while the Black American press, which had never overall been as hostile to Robeson as the white American press had been, opined that his life would always be a challenge to white and Black America. So now our gathering has come to an end. And thank you so much for a great evening, everybody. I extend our profound thanks to tonight's performers who gave their time to share their wide-ranging talent and far-reaching poetry and song with us. And thanks to you, our dear audience, an essential part for every concert, for your contribution to the successful harmony of our evening. Good night, everyone. Please keep well and stay safe.
I dreamed I saw Joe here last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he.